Developer experience is a kind of a very broad term, and different companies use kind of different words for this. I think we're definitely going to get to sort of a point where I think like building software becomes a lot more natural for a lot more people.
Which is cool, which basically kind of lowers the entry level for people to build cool stuff on cool products.
Because the great thing about building a good product is that you will get people that are excited about it, and that will tell other people about it.
Basically, my favorite superhero, which is Iron Man. Like, I remember that the thought about having Jarvis for me, like the AI-powered assistant, that basically gathers all of the context about my life and is able to like give me any piece of information that I would like to know.
If you want to build a community, build a product that is delightful to use and helpful. We were like kind of looking at the metrics and we're like, what is going on? Like this is like just going to the moon. What is happening?
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the next episode of the Next Gen Web podcast. Today, I'm joined by my co-host Hubert.
Hello. Hi.
And the one and only Thorsten Schaeff. First of all, thank you so much for finding the time to be here with us today. If you could tell us a few words of introduction, it would be awesome for the audience for sure.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Cześć. Well, unfortunately, that's where my Polish ends. I'm Thor, or Thorsten Schaeff. If you speak German, you might be able to pronounce it. But I generally just go by Thor. I work on developer experience at ElevenLabs. ElevenLabs, if you haven't heard of it, we are both an AI audio research as well as deployment company. So that means we build and train our own models and then also deploy these on our infrastructure for general usage through APIs basically. So I personally work on the developer platform, so kind of all the SDKs, the documentation, the entire kind of developer experience that also involves the community, events, and really just kind of iterating on the product feedback loop to make sure that developers, and nowadays I guess developers aren't just human developers but also AI agents are now developers, and basically making sure that both humans as well as machines have kind of the best experience building with ElevenLabs.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the introduction. I think to kick things off, I think that both me and Hubert are super interested about your whole career path and what led you to become a developer experience engineer at ElevenLabs. So we know that you had a chance to work at Stripe, at Supabase, now ElevenLabs. So these companies bring so much innovation to the tech industry. So maybe some kind of insights on your end. How did your career evolve, and what led you to basically become the engineer at ElevenLabs?
Yeah, I've been incredibly lucky just in terms of timing, I'd say. So I studied computer science and media, and I kind of used to make a lot of music back when I was, growing up in Germany. I used to have a band. There's still some old songs from ours on Spotify, which is quite funny. But so, yeah, I kind of always worked on sort of the intersection of, creativity, music, and, media, and then computer science. And so I actually started building websites, funnily enough, fairly young, kind of when I was 9 years old. My dad was working at SAP, kind of big German software company, and they were offering these kind of HTML summer camps for the employees' kids. And so basically my dad was like, okay, the boy is 9 years old, might as well teach him to build websites and, like make some money. I guess that was kind of his idea. And so that's kind of how I started sort of, back then the LAMP stack was kind of the big thing. So, MySQL, PHP, sort of what was kind of the big server-side scripting stack that I started with. And so I did a couple of these summer camps, and then later on actually became an instructor for these summer camps. So basically, while I myself was still in school, I was kind of doing like the homepage club, in school, and I ended up teaching kind of, the other employees' kids in building websites at these SAP summer camps. And this program was actually super interesting because a lot of my friends kind of back home in Germany, they are now working full-time at SAP. And so like SAP was very smart in kind of, activating these baby boomer kids early on, and sort of like getting them, kind of attached to the company, and basically kind of ensuring future employees. Now, for myself, I then kind of went off to study computer science and media, actually in Stuttgart for a bit. It was really great. I was able to work kind of across, do some music projects as well, as I mentioned, kind of with my band, and build kind of mobile and website things. And then I actually went off to do Erasmus in Dublin. And again, this was kind of the IDT, Institute of Art Design and Technology in Dublin. So always kind of at that intersection, I ended up doing an internship at Google in London. So I was working on kind of the Google Maps sales engineering team. And sort of that's when I got first exposed to kind of customer-facing engineering. So sort of the idea that you have this technology and you basically need to build demos to inspire your customers and also kind of teach them how to use the technology. This was really interesting to me because I didn't really know about this role kind of previously. And, I was like, okay, I enjoy coding, but at times, coding can also be quite lonely. And so I found that kind of a very intriguing intersection of like, you get to do some coding, but then you also get to go out and like kind of teach and talk about it. And so for me, that combination was really cool. And then I actually went back to Ireland after my internship with Google in London, actually to do my master's. And then I learned that Stripe was hiring for German support in Dublin. And I was like, okay, it's not a software engineering role, but, Stripe is only going to grow. And so like actually the best place to start in a company, especially if you're, fresh grad, for example, the support organization is an incredible place to learn everything about the product, but also about how the customer is actually using the product. Because it turns out, oftentimes you kind of think they would use the product in a certain way, but then they do something completely different. And so being kind of really close to the product and the customer, so that's kind of how I learned sort of everything about Stripe and really sort of, soaked in developer experience that, Stripe designed and really learned kind of, that is where sort of a lot of my knowledge about developer experience and documentation and, building for developers comes from. After kind of that, as Stripe grew, I stood up a bunch of customer-facing engineering teams kind of throughout my time with Stripe in Europe. Eventually ended up sort of on the community side, more developer advocacy, and actually then moved out to Singapore with Stripe to sort of build out the developer relations team for Stripe there. And then COVID happened and everything changed, and I joined Supabase. Yeah, so maybe I pause here for a second now. That was a long story.
I have a quick follow-up question because it's super interesting for me when you're talking about this intersection between the creativity and technical skills, all that weird gray area that is, for me, I feel it's super important, but I'm curious what's your take on this and how this, let's put it like this, like your creative heart of your soul was helping you or is helping you in your work. There is this, like, I would say, false image of technical people, being very technical always, which I find really not accurate. So what's your take on this? Like, how does this part of your life was helping you or is helping you?
Yeah, no, I actually think like technical people are super creative, right? Like even just coming up with solutions of like connecting things, making things work. Algorithms, I think is maths is really creative as well. I found this quite interesting, where I think actually like a lot of musicians are very technical as well, because the kind of music and math is sort of very strongly related also. So I actually think that is very closely intertwined, in like creativity in kind of software engineering is actually omnipresent. Obviously, when you're working on kind of the interface side of things, that might be a bit more visible when specifically if you're working on the user interface, the user experience. But then also, like, I don't really consider myself a good designer. In fact, I'm not. But I think like designing a good experience doesn't necessarily require you to be kind of a good designer, but sort of putting things together in a creative way where it is helpful for people. I think that is a big part. And so for me, it was always kind of these APIs. So like APIs kind of connecting everything, and like the way products are built nowadays is basically just a bunch of APIs connected to each other in creative, well, not necessarily creative ways, but in a way that it makes a useful product. And funnily enough, now with like MCP, technically it's just an API, with some extra sugar. But so that was really also what drew me to ElevenLabs, is that combination of kind of languages, audio, AI, and APIs. Like ElevenLabs is sort of that an entire package of kind of all the things I'm passionate about. And so this was really cool, then for this to also be a European company that is, kind of like at the forefront of the AI innovation at the moment. That was really exciting. And so I joined 5 months ago. Yeah. And it's been really incredible kind of seeing the growth of, ElevenLabs, the product, but then also be kind of now we're doubling down on the developer platform and seeing, kind of what both sort of the small developers, the solo entrepreneurs, the indie hackers, up to like, the AI startups, to the enterprise level, like everyone is building really, really cool things with this technology. And so that's very rewarding.
Yeah, I have a follow-up question here. So basically, considering that currently your main role is about shipping mainly for developers, like whole ElevenLabs SDK, the APIs, the core functionality, which basically should enable us developers to ship amazing products safely, fast, and basically in a fun way. I think that maybe you can bring a bit more the context and the topic of the whole developer experience role, the developer experience engineer. So I think that super interesting take from your end would be maybe your perspective on the day-to-day basis. What are like the main responsibilities for such a role? And like maybe your thoughts about the impact of the developer experience overall on the product and the just the course the company is taking right now.
Developer experience is a kind of a very broad term, and different companies use kind of different words for this. I kind of like to see there's kind of these three main pillars, which sort of A being the product, the actual SDKs, the APIs, the product feedback loop, facilitating that. So that means, being really close to the product teams, the software engineers that are building the product internally, and then also being really close to users using the product. And so, this product feedback loop is basically you're kind of the first, people call it customer zero for the tools. So you provide that early feedback, you build kind of early applications, demos, and test out the product, kind of battle test it from a developer experience point of view, and then provide that feedback back to the product team. And so as you're launching the product, you then, bring this out to the community. So this is sort of the second pillar, is the content piece. And the content piece is really crucial. There, are so many developers globally of, different shapes and sizes. So the content piece, we can dig into that a little bit more later. I have kind of a couple different pillars within sort of that content pillar as well. And then sort of the third pillar being kind of the community piece, where, you're really engaging with the community, you're collecting their feedback, you're, building kind of these community advocates and really sort of getting people to talk about the product is kind of the goal. So you build an experience that is good enough for developers to, rave about. And so that is sort of the, product-led growth, I guess, in a sense. Obviously, we also do a lot of events and sponsorships, and to kind of reach more developers there to kind of speed that up. But ultimately, you really need to build a product that developers want to rave about. And I think this was kind of a big learning from Stripe. So like in the early days, Stripe didn't spend any money on marketing. It was literally purely word of mouth and press. And so really driven by building the best, developer experience, and that being kind of a combination of, the APIs itself, the client libraries, the documentation, the API reference. So building something that developers will actually be talking about and raving about, and actually investing their own time in building these sub communities. So we saw this at Stripe, where a lot of the client libraries for some of the more, kind of obscure languages were built by the community. So these were open source contributors who were like, oh, I need this for my project. I'm using Perl because I work at booking.com. Maybe there was like this one person that still uses Perl. And so they, ended up building kind of a client library for that. And so, your goal should be to build a product that is good enough for developers to A, talk about, and B, to like invest their time in teaching their peers, as well as building open source projects around it. Like if you can achieve that, and I think that's been kind of a common theme for me, with Stripe as well as Supabase, to really achieve that, where you build a community that loves the product so much that they will literally like happily invest their time in teaching others, as well as like building kind of open source projects around it. And that is kind of the incredible power of sort of the community pillar there. So to recap, kind of, product, content, and community, that's sort of the three pillars that I broadly see within developer experience.
Yeah, so the first thought that came up to my mind after that is that basically you, with your personality, you seem like a perfect fit for this role, like the kind of the mix of the engineering standpoint, both with the connection with the folks, the community, the contribution to open source. Yeah, basically, as I said, like having the products that engineers want to basically teach is the perfect example, and kind of the best evidence that it's like working correctly, and like people are actually excited to use them. So yeah, absolutely, thank you for that. I think that having the good overview of the kind of perspective of the developer experience engineering and the whole concept in general is going to be like pretty interesting for the audience for sure. So yeah, thanks for that. And kind of the follow-up question. So kind of moving more towards the ElevenLabs aspect and kind of the product that ElevenLabs brings to the people. I'm pretty curious about also like from perspective, you mentioned that you made music before. So from this perspective, maybe you can share like some exciting use cases of the AI audio, the SDKs, the APIs. What are your thoughts about the usage here? I also know that you had a pretty fun example of usage from the speech duplication, where you managed to basically explain your work both to your parents and the parents-in-law. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's what I've seen. So the perfect basically the use case of the tech that ElevenLabs brings. So maybe you can give us some insights on the usage, the use cases. What are your thoughts about that?
Like where ElevenLabs started, and what's really cool, I mean, how it grew so incredibly quickly, and you probably will appreciate this because both founders of ElevenLabs, Maciej and Piotr, are from Poland, and they grew up kind of in Poland with sort of your movie dubbing culture, which are here is kind of pretty bare bones back in the days where you have one Polish narrator who would do kind of all the characters, and wouldn't even like try to act the different characters, basically just read out the script. And sort of, from that background, when the technology got to a point where you can actually clone voices and basically have models that can speak in many, many different languages. So Maciej and Piotr were like, okay, we want to, actually fix this and make basically any content out there available in any language and in any voice. And so that's where ElevenLabs started, is sort of this dubbing, and very much kind of targeted back then at sort of the media and entertainment community. So a lot of the social media creators use this. And so that was for me as well, because I'm German originally. I've been living kind of in English-speaking countries for a while. Then my wife is Taiwanese, so her parents speak kind of Taiwanese Mandarin. There's also Taiwanese as its own language, which makes it even more complicated. But so I really kind of identified with that mission of we're all just people. If we can sort of communicate with each other more easily, then that would be really, really great. And so obviously that is kind of one big use case, is sort of that media and entertainment world where ElevenLabs started. But now we're kind of entering this era of agentic voice applications, so conversational AI agents, because now we can actually the technology is good enough to basically transcribe what someone is saying in real time, process that through some large language model, which is sort of the intelligence, the brain, which then responds back. And then using ElevenLabs kind of flash models, we can very quickly stream speech, and so we can optimize this pipeline, and that's what we've done with kind of ElevenLabs conversational AI, to actually allow you to have these really kind of human-like conversations with machines. And obviously there's huge use cases there. Customer support is kind of a big one, but also kind of in the medical field, like consultations, we have an aging population. Yes, our parents are quite good at using technology, but then maybe our grandparents aren't so well kind of with the mobile phone. And so I think actually we're going to see a huge increase of kind of voice as the next user interface, because I think it makes so much sense. It's like how we humans naturally communicate. And so I think how we went to kind of the mobile phone and responsive design sort of being the user interface pattern of the last kind of decade. I think we're going to enter into kind of a world where voice-centric kind of user interfaces are going to be a lot more common. And I think, it's just so natural that, when you step into, it's quite funny because when you're in San Francisco, you now have these self-driving cars, right? Mm-hmm. And you can call a Waymo, but like once you're in the car, you can't actually talk to it. Like you still have to like go on the app and kind of adjust sort of the location on the map. If you want to change your drop-off location, you should just be able to say like, hey, just drop me off over there on the corner. And so I think, voice as sort of the modality of any application. And I kind of like to see it in a way where we probably will see applications that basically will generate an interface based on the user. So I think these kind of hyper personalized user interfaces. So rather than you building a UI, that everyone on mobile sees, the user will see a different UI and, ideally probably not even see any UI. So basically it would just say, this is what I want to do, and the application will just do it. And so I think, that conversational sort of the voice as the user interface, we're going to see a lot more. And obviously ElevenLabs is kind of at the forefront of that. And so I personally love to talk as well, so you probably have noticed. Very, very excited kind of what's to come there.
That's super interesting. And I think that what you mentioned is that the technology, especially on this field, becomes more and more, I would say, transparent or like elusive. From the end user perspective, it becomes really, really magical to some extent, to some point. And I once heard that sentence that the best technology ever imaginable is the one that we cannot see, like all those, tiny little embedded systems that are working around us all the time, checking a lot of stuff. Like in our cars, they're making sure that the speed of the car is, corresponding with the power of the brakes, etc., etc. Everything around us is sort of magically steered by all those little algorithms that are just, murmuring somewhere in the background. So I completely agree with you, and with this diagnosis that this kind of interface, voice interface, is very human, very democratic, I would say, interface for us, very natural, which is taking away the boundaries that we used to have, even if this boundary is front end of the website. You mentioned older generation that has a problem, usually has a problem or might have a problem with using the modern technology. Even sometimes the simple form, something super simple for us, is a challenge for them. What do you think comes next? Like what will happen in a near future, like in a year or two?
Yeah, it's a very good question, because I feel like nowadays, like even a year, like even if we just look back 1 year now, right? The amount of things that have changed in the way that we're building software is pretty wild, I think. Just looking at Cursor, Lovable, Bolt, V0, the tooling that sort of empowers us to build software. And, especially now to the point where, if you have like a super niche kind of need for some software for like your soccer club, right? Now you just go and you just ask some coding agent to create it for you. So I think it's pretty difficult to predict kind of in a year's time what the world will look like, because It's crazy. I just came back from a vacation. So last week I just went completely offline and cycled a lap around Taiwan. You know, incredibly gorgeous island, and it's wild. You know, even just catching up after 1 week, kind of the amount of things that have happened, not just in AI, but just in terms of like, you know, global world news. But so difficult prediction, but yeah, I think we're definitely going to get to sort of a point where I think like building software becomes a lot more natural for a lot more people. And I think we're going to see sort of a lot more builders kind of enter the stage with, you know, super niche applications, small agents. I think we're going to see sort of everything being connected with everything else very easily. I think that's kind of what the MCP protocol is sort of working towards. And yeah, I think there's going to be a big shift in how we're using the internet, which I think is going to be very interesting. Yeah, I think voice is going to be huge modality to, you know, sort of the point, you know, where like sometimes you like remind yourself, oh, I have to like go do that, and then, you know, I have to do that and that. Like in the future, you're probably just gonna like say this into your, you know, chat GPT, and it goes off and, you know, does kind of all the different things, like enables the feature flag there, sends an email to your customer. And so I think pretty difficult to predict, but I'm quite excited to, yeah, for voice to be a lot more central in kind of the user interfaces that we built. And I think with that also just freeing up maybe our screen time. Although if we're looking at, you know, now AI is kind of generating a bunch of videos as well, right? So maybe the screen time is not gonna get less. But no, I do like the idea of like us building applications that connect us more sort of with the people around us, but also sort of the nature around us and applications that we can use. So I do a lot of cycling and canoeing, and you know, you can't use a phone like while you do that. And so having interfaces, you know, the Meta Ray bands are quite interesting in the sense that you can actually, you know, give them voice commands to like take videos and kind of stuff. And so I think we're going to see some exciting ecosystems around there. I'm still hoping that Meta will eventually open this up for developers to like build, you know, applications for these classes, where I think we can do some really cool stuff with voice. And so, yeah, I think less screens, more voice. Although probably I have to say that.
Yeah, so basically the first thought that came up to my mind, basically my favorite superhero, which is Iron Man. Like I remember that just the thought about having Jarvis for me, like the AI powered assistant that basically gathers all of the context about my life and is able to like give me any piece of information that I would like to know. Like a few years ago, if somebody like told me that, hey, like we can basically get to this point like pretty soon, basically, like having the AI-based assistant with the ability to like talk to you with the natural voice, it kind of becomes the reality. So super exciting times, and yeah, just the course that AI is taking right now is, yeah, for sure pretty exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. One more thing that came to my mind is that what you, Thor, mentioned with the voice being the interface for many things that were before that there were just blog or unavailable. I think also that in our times we see more and more people becoming lonely or becoming a bit lost in the context of technology, but in the context of the world itself. I would say so many things are happening at once one day we're speaking today, tomorrow we don't know what's going to happen in the Middle East. We will look at it, and we will need somebody to also help us to explain things which are very, very complex. And I think the past years just made us realize how the technology can be involved in a very good and in a very bad way at the same time. So those are like, I would argue, decisive. Like, this is one of the decisive moments, the paradigm shift that we are looking, and maybe the voice recognition and speech to text and this technology behind it will be one of the things that we need to be very, very aware of going forward. So that's why we are also very interested in this. But of course, we can spend probably a week talking about this. So maybe let's circle back to a little bit to the three pillars that you mentioned. And I'm very curious in a development experience. I'm very curious about the community part. Like, how is it look like? You mentioned the Stripe experience that was primarily about the community, and then the product sort of the whole thing started to spin, and the marketing, of course, now the Stripe is one of the biggest players in the industry. But what's your take on the community building in the development experience? Like, how is it done?
It's interesting because a lot of community building comes with just building a good product. Because the great thing about building a good product is that you will get people that are excited about it, and that will tell other people about it. And so I think if you want to build a community, build a product that is delightful to use and helpful to people. And then once you have that, you kind of need to look out for, okay, who are the people that are sort of your champions, that are kind of just naturally drawn to your technology, that, share it with others, that open kind of bug reports or feature requests. And basically from there, sort of build your, circles of sort of, orbits or whatever you might want to call it, of kind of the different community advocates within the network. And sort of keep them close, engage them with kind of early access to the technology, maybe share some preview features with them, share some swag with them, help them actually organize events for you. So that was a big part at Supabase as well, where it's like, you can't organize every event, that's just not possible. So if you can find sort of the community champions in the different places that are there, that are excited to sort of share, what you're building with their communities. And at Supabase, kind of a big part of that was sort of building a community of communities, which was really cool because we had the Postgres community where there's a huge ecosystem of extensions, right? Postgres has been around for many, many decades. And there's a huge amount of developers building extensions for Postgres. But Postgres itself had been, very sort of kind of back-end focus, very inaccessible for like a broader developer audience. So basically we're kind of looking at, okay, how can we connect all these different communities to each other? How can sort of the PG Vector extension builder sort of, be connected to kind of the nextjs full stack developer, right? How do you draw that bridge? You really need to build a good product that people will love to invest their time in. And then when they do invest their time, you do need to kind of recognize them and, keep them close, give them access to kind of, early features, empower them to sort of build their own community. And with that, you're basically just getting such, compounding powerful effect. If you look at, how Supabase sort of started throughout COVID, and then in the early days it felt very slow. We grew it very organically, very product led, very community led growth, very organic, and it just compounded massively. Like all these kind of grassroots initiatives that we built with the community, it just compounded so immensely. And then when kind of ChatGPT came up and LLMs and sort of all that content and all that open source knowledge and all that content that the community had built was being picked up by the LLMs. And we actually didn't know that, like, suddenly the Lovables and the Bol.news, they just chose Supabase as their backend, and we were like kind of looking at the metrics, and we're like, what is going on? Like, this is like just going to the moon. What is happening? And so then we realized that, like, when you ask an LLM, okay, I need to integrate a database, what should I use? And it would come back with use Supabase. And so I think that's now where you sort of need to build that community, but building that community is sort of very, very closely intertwined with building the product as well as building the content. I think like all these three pillars are just so intertwined and go so much hand in hand, that you can't just focus on one of them. You really need to kind of build sort of strong foundations with all these three pillars, and you will see kind of massive compounding effects as time goes on.
Absolutely. I mean, the part about building the product at the first place, even from my perspective, like touching the topic with Supabase, as you said, like having the kind of accessible kind of way to manage Postgres. I remember that, so me mainly focusing on Next.js, just having the ability to basically spin up the Postgres with authentication, all of the sweet stuff, the PG vectors. I mean, it was so easy and so developer friendly that basically creating those apps was just pure fun. Also currently with all of the MCP servers, the way we built those, even creating the schemas, the integrations with plain natural language with the MCP servers connections. I think that sometimes only the imagination can be the limitation for developers, which is cool, which basically kind of lowers the entry level for people to build cool stuff on cool products. So that is super, basically super fun times to build cool stuff and ship them. Also, I had a chance to try out the SDKs from ElevenLabs, and pretty much the experience of the feeling of plug and play, just getting to speed up with the development of very cool features, which back then wouldn't be basically possible to make. Currently, we can ship things super fast, but kind of circling back to the AI audio topic, I think that we are in exciting times where we have a lot of opportunities with that, but also there is a lot of threats coming with this. So like some cases, like we even touched with the kind of older generation, which can be more prone to like disinformation, the deepfakes. So maybe we can have a quick chat about kind of the strategy of ElevenLabs. How do you guys think about it? I'm pretty sure that's a huge topic also at your company, so maybe you can have a quick discussion about that.
That's a very good point, because so for us, ElevenLabs, we're both the research company as well as the deployment company. So we develop kind of safety tools very much hand in hand with sort of all the technology we put out. So actually, if you go to elevenlabs.io/safety, you can see sort of the main kind of safety tools and considerations that we built into the platform. And that is also to a certain degree, kind of the reason why the platform is so closed. And, like at the moment, you can't sort of run these models on your own infrastructure, right? You have to use ElevenLabs. And there's a couple of reasons for that, because actually on our infrastructure, we can make sure that all the content that is being generated is watermarked, for example. So we're working on an industry standard for speech synthesis to be watermarked to the extent where you can actually sort of identify back which account generated this speech. So that is kind of one way where, we obviously take it very seriously when there's reports of kind of misuse of our technology. And then with that, with the watermark, we can actually identify whether something was generated with ElevenLabs, and even which kind of account generated it. But also we actively kind of moderate and monitor which content is being generated. So, for example, if you clone your voice and publish it on the platform, so we work with a lot of voice actors that actually publish their voice to be used in applications, that are built with ElevenLabs. And so we give you tools as the owner of your voice. We give you tools for live moderation, for example, to restrict kind of what content can be generated with your voice. And then obviously also when your voice is being used for speech generation, we pay out royalties to the owner of the voice. And so we really want to make sure that we develop this technology in a way where it's used for good, and there's a lot of good and positive use cases for this technology, and then also we want to make sure that we build the tooling and the safety measures that we can limit the amount of bad actors that can utilize this technology. And so yes, the safety efforts are very, very center to kind of our platform development.
I think that's super important what you just said, because I would say, as we mentioned before, we're living in a complex world where everything is sort of mixed up, where everything is sort of connected. But I think and I really do think that it's up to us, people related to the tech, to speak a lot about the good and positive aspects. It doesn't mean that we don't see the negativity or the completely corrupted applications of the technology. We can give examples of any technology. If we take a kitchen knife, you can cook with the kitchen knife a beautiful dish, something for your family, for yourself, etc. You can use it as a weapon. And of course, it goes like this with every technology. But I think it's super important what you just said, that of course there will be a misguided, corrupted usage of the voice recognition technology or speech-to-text or any other AI-backed solution. But especially when we are getting closer and closer to the human, let's say, human experience of it. But it's up to us to sort of advocate for the best usage, for the democratic, absolutely open tools that are helping people basically to find their way in the world and to cope, to be better. So yeah, that's great. One thing that I wanted also to just very, very small follow-up, and I'm just curious how you guys in ElevenLabs are treating the feedback that is coming from the community. I was sort of witnessing the beginning of the shift towards the open source in the big pharma industry some time ago. And one of the things that was super problematic was how to implement the feedback that is coming actually from the community. So there was this first step saying, okay, let's open some libraries. Let's open some part of the, let's build some, kind of repository for packages. It was connected with the R, very like statistical language, but very important for the pharma, for the clinical trials. But there was a lack of this or inability to make a second step saying, okay, people are claiming that this software needs to be this and that. And then there was a question, so who's the owner? Who's the owner of this software? Like, we need to regulate. We are highly regulated, environment. So we cannot do this just like that. So I wonder, how is it for you in ElevenLabs? How are you approaching the feedback that it's coming from the community?
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing for us is that there is a lot of channels that feedback are coming in. Also because ElevenLabs is a product that is very highly used through the dashboard. So obviously we've built feedback tools kind of into the dashboard to allow you to kind of provide feedback in there, and that's kind of funneled back into a centralized tool on our end. For developers specifically, we do have our Discord channels, and those are a challenge in itself as they grow very rapidly, to sort of monitor all the feedback that is coming in. And then you have a lot of other channels in terms of like GitHub, even Twitter. Twitter is a huge channel, or X as it's called nowadays, for product feedback, and especially for developers, it's a pretty big channel as well. But then you have as well, you have Reddit, you have Hacker News. So there's a lot of sort of different channels. Mm-hmm. We're still kind of trying to figure this out, sort of at ElevenLabs, the right tooling. At Supabase, we were utilizing Common Room to a big part of kind of listening to sort of all the chatter that was happening, and Common Room was just kind of integrated with all the different platforms, and then was centralized, sort of aggregating all the feedback centrally, and kind of putting a sentiment analysis to it, and sort of checking what hasn't been actioned. So that was immensely helpful at Supabase. At ElevenLabs, for now, kind of the developer feedback is still fairly monitorable within the team. But so that is kind of what we're now, figuring out sort of the best way to automatically, ingest kind of all the feedback that's coming in. And that is always a big task, sort of. Also identifying, what is the right feedback versus, who are just the people screaming like the loudest. That's not always necessarily the best feedback. But so, that's a big challenge. And I feel like no one actually properly solved this. It's like something that is just constantly ongoing, and you're constantly trying to optimize. And so I think that's also why we're constantly still seeing new tools being built in that space. So I'm afraid I don't have a good answer for you just yet. I'll get back to you once we've properly solved this.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I'm just wondering about, we kind of touched the workflow of the team, so gathering the feedback. Super curious about the way you guys work at ElevenLabs. I know, Thor, that you're a big like AI tools advocate. You mentioned Cursor quite a few times. I think it would be super interesting to get to know if there are like any specific tools that you guys are using. Maybe you have some kind of standards. Maybe some like tips for using the AI on the daily basis, like from the engineering perspective, but also if you guys have like any type of interesting implementation of AI tools on the like daily workflow. It would be super interesting to get to know that.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, we do use Cursor quite extensively also, just in terms of sort of Cursor rules is kind of a big one for us, where sort of the especially with kind of the documentation, we have sort of the writing standard and kind of the formatting standard and kind of all that. encoded in the cursor rules to help us sort of speed up the development there. We do use Fern for sort of a big part auto-generating SDKs to a certain extent, as well as open, API specification. So just kind of helping us speed things up there. In terms of documentation, also we're utilizing Fern to have some kind of pre-built components that we can use throughout the docs and kind of building on top of that. So they've been a really great partner in sort of shipping things quickly there. Cursor, Fern, we do use just plain old ChatGPT. Claude as well. It kind of depends on the task a little bit. I personally use ChatGPT a lot to sort of just proofread my tweets nowadays, and sort of, you now need to tell it to always take out the M dashes because that is sort of
always
how you identify AI content nowadays. But so that's a big tool. Obviously we're using kind of a lot of tools of like our customers as well, sort of internally. So, HeyGen for like video avatar generation, we're playing around with that. Hydra as well. We're using a lot of the Google, Gemini 2.0. VO, actually, we're playing around with it now and kind of see how that best integrates with kind of our speech and sound effect models. I think there's a lot of things that we experiment kind of across the board. But then also, I think like Cursor and Fern are sort of two of the big ones that are very deeply integrated into our workflows right now.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And you being on the frontier of the also research in this, like it's probably the best strategy to use them all, right? There is no one AI so far. There will probably never will be any one to rule them all. There will be maybe better integration, better communication between the components, etc., etc. To wrap up our conversation, I wanted to ask you one last thing. So if the question will be, what's your advice for the company? Like there are a lot of startups, a lot of product companies. They're kind of starting their journey, or they have product, or they have an idea, different stages. But what will be your advice for somebody who would like to start the DX department, or just start his journey? Where to put your first step? Which direction, how to start, basically, from your vast experience. What's the first step, first move to build the good development experience? Maybe just start.
It's a good question. I think to a certain extent, if you're building developer tooling, you're probably a developer yourself. So if you sort of start with building something that you need yourself and like being useful to yourself, I think that's a good place to start. The thing though is then once you have that, you need to tell people about it. And so I think maybe we can dig a little bit into sort of the content piece, and how I like to approach this is, so like anytime you launch a new feature for developers, you need to have sort of the basics down in terms of like, yes, your API reference, your documentation, but then, you need to go beyond kind of the quick start documentation. You need to have an end-to-end tutorial that sort of guides someone, end to end of like, I've never touched this before, to like, okay, this is how I get a working application. And so within that tutorial, some developers prefer to read, content. And generally, I think like in the Western kind of developer culture, they just like to have really good documentation, and say they kind of like to read that. If you're sort of going to Asia, for example, there's a lot more favor to sort of video content, audiovisual content. So once you have kind of your documentation, your end-to-end guide, if you have an end-to-end guide, that also means you have an example app that you've built, because that's kind of what you've written the guide about. So make sure you make it as easy as possible for a developer, no more than 2 clicks to sort of get to their preferred way of getting started. So say, I'm a developer who prefers video content, but I come through your docs guide. It shouldn't take me more than, like linked at the top. Here's like the GitHub repository. Go off to that GitHub repository. At the same time, if someone finds you through GitHub, but they prefer to watch the video, your GitHub should always link back to your written content, but then also your video content. And then your video content itself is a huge, like YouTube is one of the biggest search engines as well. So having your content there, having people find sort of your content through video, but then potentially, they prefer again the example app or the guide. So making sure that you have all this content ready for your launch, but then also making sure that it doesn't take more than 2 clicks for the developer to land on their preferred kind of content. I think with that, sort of you can really optimize the amount of people that will find your content, but then also be so delighted that they will share it with their community. And I think that is, sort of one of the biggest things you can do is build something that's useful to yourself, and then create content around it that makes it useful to others. And so I think just kind of having that teaching mindset, and sort of realizing that not everyone is the same. And I think now as well, with sort of the coding agents, you need to make sure that you have kind of open source examples that actually the LLMs and the coding agents can ingest and can learn from, to make sure that if someone asks to like build an app with your technology, the agent needs to know how to do that. And so I think keeping that in mind, that you have to create content for different humans, but also different machines nowadays. And I think that is a really good way to get started.
Yeah, I find it really, really interesting that you mentioned the documentation and to guide somebody through your idea, just being honest and being very transparent as a first step. I like it.
Yeah, also the kind of the switch in the approach that basically nowadays the LLMs kind of tend to be the source of information for most of the people. Like even my non-technical friends that basically used to Google everything, now it kind of shifts to more like deep research for like super insightful searches, but basically going to like ChatGPT and asking the questions and optimizing the even the documentation, having that in place so that the LLMs can basically digest that and also provide some information to the users. That is very interesting trend. I think that kind of the optimization for the LLM digestion and having that in the search is going to be like a big trend moving forward. So yeah, super interesting times.
It was super interesting conversation, and it was really, really great to have you, Thor, with us. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you for being with us, and yeah, I hope we'll have time anytime soon to chat more.
Yeah, sure. I mean, like with the amount of stuff that just keeps coming within the developer experience sphere, maybe even around 2 for the podcast. I think that we still have like so many topics that we could cover. So yeah, once again, thank you so much, Thor, for finding the time.
Yep. Have a great day.
Thanks so much for having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Guys, thank you so much for watching, for sticking with us to the end. I hope that you found this discussion interesting. So, if you like this content, please feel free to like, subscribe, and also leave the feedback in the comment. We've got super interesting episodes coming next. We are going to dive deep into the AI coding tools. So, if you like this content, Make sure to follow us on the social media. And yeah, thank you from my end.
Thank you very much. It was great having you with us today, and have a great day. Bye.